Okay, so today the AstrHori lens 50mm f2.0 portrait lens. Interesting piece of gear. I use a lot L mounts because I have a Leica SL2, which is basically my main camera for testing equipment. And I was looking for a 50mm lens that would be maybe a little bit different or have some other options. And this one's really one of the most important things. I think it's definitely cheap. It's below 80 euros. That's the price I bought it new, made in China. And yeah, it's actually it's not a 2.0. On the website it states that if you go beyond 2, you basically have 1.6 aperture with this lens. Really well made, metallic. Definitely not to the level of a Leica lens or some higher quality brand, but really still very well made, very nice to use. It's a manual focus lens only, and it's got 6 elements, optical elements in 5 groups with a 9-blade diaphragm. You can see here, and yeah, it's a full frame lens, really cheap. Chinese made, as I said before. Sometimes I feel the aperture ring is a little bit weird for me, and I find myself fully closed with it. Anyways, I feel it's hard sometimes for me but that's me, to differentiate the focus from the diaphragm. But I'll get used to it, maybe. And yeah, very well built. And let's go see a few photo examples. So the first 2 images actually are from my first batch of images I took with the lens when I was starting to discover it. And I was kind of underwhelmed at first. I felt like, oh, this is kind of flat. But looking at it, 2 things came out pretty fast. And my impression was the geometry seems really good. It actually renders reality quite objectively, and the bokeh is strangely soft and neutral. But we will see also that the colors tend to go on the colder side. That's definitely part of the characteristic of this lens. Even so, we have modern white balance optimization on our cameras and post-processing software. But in those next 2 pictures, here we get a little bit more of what I was saying about the bokeh. Very interesting. The transition is very smooth. It's a very soft but well-defined bokeh. I thought it was kind of underwhelming before, but I don't know how to say, but except kind of a neutral bokeh. Good differentiation of the different layers, distance layers, but also to note that AstrHori says it's an f2.0 lens, but at some places it says that if you open it up at its max, it's actually basically a 1.6. That could also explain this increased depth of field for a 2.0 apparent depth of field. But again, yeah, this bokeh is really smooth. Next 2 pictures. Here we kind of see also the limitations of this formula. On the right, we have those chromatic aberrations with the magenta hues on the high contrast in the water. Closer to us, and the cyan transformation on the images further away from the focal plane, and also this lens flare on the left image, which is quite typical of this lens. It doesn't come very often, but when it comes, you definitely will have those semicircles, kind of purpley, pinkish images, but not that disturbing. Well, I mean, it depends what kind of photograph you take, but I didn't find it that disturbing, finally, a kind of a geometrical shape. If we go on more traditional settings, that's the same picture. On the left, it's an uncropped picture, and on the right, that's a crop. So as I was saying, the geometry is really good. The colors tend to go on the colder side, but overall, it's pretty well defined. A small glow, as you can see with the cow. It kind of glows in the high contrast zones of the picture. And there might be a slight circular bokeh also, as we can see on the tree on the forefront. But otherwise, the transition of the bokeh is really nice. And as I was saying before, very undisturbing, very soft, smooth. Kind of a neutral lens in many ways. Again, here's a picture on the right that's uncropped, and a crop on those paddle borders, this slight glow. So here we also see the limitation of the definition of this lens. These pictures are taken with Leica SL2 with a 47 megapixel sensor. Is pretty well defined. Here's a lens is kind of doesn't reach the limits of the sensor, but doesn't seem, at least on my tests. But but really, actually, with time, I kind of got pleasantly surprised and kind of appreciated using the lens here. Again, that's part of a test I did in the mountains, the Jura Mountains. Good definition, good geometrical reproduction. The verticals and horizontal lines seem really nicely rendered, no real distortion. Again, this slight cold transformation of the colors, but this bokeh is really nice. You can see on the picture on the right or even on the left, very smooth transition, very undisturbing. And if you go for more high contrast situations, there might be a slight vignetting, but really very little. And actually I started liking, usually the pictures are kind of slightly flat, but you can really have some depths when you have high contrast with this lens, probably linked to small glow. And also lots of details when you get very close. Here's probably around the maximal, the minimum, I would say, distance to the subject I could take with this lens on this tree trunk. Again, the user experience is really nice. It's not something overwhelming in terms. It doesn't feel luxurious, but it's precise. It's well built, nice to use. Here also 2 pictures from the same series. That's probably really part of the characteristic of this lens. It tends to make things colder in terms of colors, but yeah, that's interesting personality. Not very strong, doesn't try to impose itself, but there's definitely some personality and some pleasure to use because of this very soft and well-defined, respectful bokeh. Here again 2 pictures, one on the left in lower light situations with some contrast, or otherwise here on the right, this scene in Reykjavik with 2 cats in Reykjavik. Yeah, and interesting. And also thinking about the price of this lens, affordability, it's a really good combination. Maybe in some situations where you don't want something too fragile, it's a really well-built lens, not too expensive. It's not too much of a shame if you hurt it, I'll say, and works well even in lower light situations like here. Nice. Again here with some lens flare on the picture on the right, it gives you an idea also of this very close bokeh on the picture on the right, and on the left that's the Mont Blanc mountains in the Alps. Or here again in not that contrasty scenes, lots of details in this lens, very nice geometrical rendering. It's kind of a lens I started really enjoying, so I'm definitely keeping it in my arsenal. Here again 2 images, for example the contrasty one on the right in the Reykjavik Opera, or in the restaurant bar also in Reykjavik at Anna in low light situations. We have this quite particular actually bokeh. At first it seems really neutral, but there's not so many lenses today at that price point and of that kind that have such a soft and neutral bokeh with a really nice transition. Anyhow, these were my examples, so hopefully that was helpful. So don't hesitate to post comments, questions, or other propositions below. Catch you in another VandCam episode.